my name is Nikita Stark, Human Dynamics Specialist and Alchemy Facilitator. Today is part 2 of a 6-part series discussing the architecture of the self. Today's episode is the voice of the wound. If you find this work is helping you, if it's landing, if it's helping you to slow down and look inward, then please support this channel by liking and subscribing, and share with someone who is ready to go deeper into self-inquiry to find freedom in their life. Now let's get into it, shall we? As we spoke about in the last episode, if the mask is what we show to the world, the voice of the wound is what we hear inside. It becomes so bloody familiar, we mistake it for our own thoughts. But most of the time, it isn't ours at all. So let's start with the voice of our mother. Our inner voice is usually formed in relationship with our mum. And it isn't only shaped how she treated us, it's also shaped by how she treated herself. A child studies a mum's self-talk long before there are words for any of it. So it might be the sigh when she looks in the mirror, or the way her shoulders drop when she makes a mistake, or this constant apology for taking up space. It might be a rush to serve everyone else before she eats or rests or even bloody breathes. Her tone toward herself becomes basically a template for our tone towards ourselves. And if she meets her own needs with softness and repair, we can learn self-soothing as children. If she meets her needs with contempt, or minimizes it, or martyrdom, we learn, in turn, the same edge inwards. The body reads everything. A mother who calls herself stupid, or says she looks awful, or apologizes just for existing, it teaches a kid that self-attack is perfectly normal. A mum who never says no, or who is last to sit down, or who laughs off hurt rather than naming it, it teaches kids that boundaries are really dangerous and feelings are inconvenient. Even when she never says these things out loud, her breath will give it away, her micro-expressions, the way she paces, her posture, her nervous system. The child does not just learn how mum talks to me, the child learns how I talk to me. This is why so many adults carry this inner narrator that sounds like inherited family slogans. So we can hear stuff like, "Stop making a fuss, get on with it. Good girls don't need X, Y, and Z. Rest is lazy. Love is earned." You know, that's what we hear. And when we choose partners, jobs and communities that resonate with that soundtrack, we accept those crumbs because the voice says crumbs are plenty. Have all that. We almost overfunction because the voice says safety lives in being useful, or we'll ignore a red flag because the voice says discomfort is familiar and therefore it's safe. None of this is a moral failure. It's basically a faithful replication of the field we were raised in. Now, the opposite is true as well. When a mum models self-respect, names her needs, without apologies and without drama, and she repairs when she mucks up, and she treats her body with basic kindness, the child internalizes that tone. The inner voice becomes really steady, and it witnesses rather than critiques itself. And it doesn't mean that this person's perfect. It means the baseline message is, I matter. I'm not a problem. Wouldn't that be nice if we all started off like that? Now, this is nuanced. Fathers and other caregivers also imprint on us, and many mums were carrying lineages of unhealed pain with no real support from way back when. So the point here is not to blame. I think we need to look at clarity. And when we understand that our inner voice began as our mother's voice to herself, I think we stop the argument and we just meet it with truth. And we can see it in awareness, and we can begin to choose a different tone and break the pattern. Let's talk about the voice of the father. The dad's role, in turn, is quite different. He often sets the tone for how we step out of the intimate field of the home and into the wider stage of life. So it's how we relate to the world. Through him, directly or indirectly, we learn how to meet others and how to respond to authority, how to find belonging outside the family. So basically how we relate to the world. If the mother is the first mirror for how we speak to ourselves, the father often becomes the lens through which we see the external world. His presence or absence, his warmth or distance, respect or disregard, all of that shapes how we approach community, rules, and relationships beyond our little inner circle. A father who delights in his child, who celebrates their quirks and ideas, that sets the imprint that the world is receptive and it's safe to engage with. But a dad who withdraws and criticises or dominates teaches that kid the world is dangerous and it's cold and it's really hard. So it's important to mention this is not about the father's words alone. Just as with the mother, it's about his relationship with himself and others. A dad who bows to authority without question models compliance. A father who rebels against every structure models distrust. A dad who holds steady boundaries with respect models discernment. All of these lessons are absorbed by the child as a felt orientation. And this is how I move through the world. This is how you understand later on in life what the world means to you. Now, of course, this is nuanced. Many children are raised without dads or by men who were physically present, but they had emotionally checked out years ago. Others had mums who played both roles, or extended family could fill the gap. So these dynamics are not rigid rules, but they are common pattern. As a broad principle, the mum becomes the inner narrator, shaping how we relate to ourselves, and the dad sets the posture with which we face outward, and shaping how we relate to others and to the structures of society. Now, this is why so many adults struggle in two distinct but connected ways. An inner voice that bullies, dismisses, or doubts, and an outer stance that either collapses in front of others or pushes back against them. Interesting, isn't it? Both come from early mirrors. Both replay until they are seen and actually witnessed. Now let's talk about the echo of this. This is why the voice of the wound feels really quite intimate. It's the echo of the person who first reflected us back to ourselves. For me, my mum, I felt she gaslit me constantly. I learned very early that my reality was wrong, that what I felt and saw couldn't be trusted. So that script became the way I related to myself as an adult, and it became the lens in which I viewed my life. My inner voice bullied me daily, repeating that message that I'm not good enough. Now, eventually, I gave my ego a name. I called him Clive. I don't know why. It just fit. Naming him helped me to step back and observe rather than identify with that really irritating voice. So when Clive speaks now, which he does, I don't automatically believe him. I hear him as like part of like my essence, and this helped me shift from identifying with the inner voice to just witnessing it. And to me, that was the beginning of freedom. But most people never make that shift. They live their whole lives mistaking the voice of the wound for who they are and their identity. And because the inner voice is the lens through which we experience our life, it paints everything, which includes our relationships, our choices, even the opportunities we see or miss, because you're going to look through blinkered vision with this lens. Now let's talk about the mechanics of this, and this is the psychological stance. And I always like to do the psychological, the spiritual, and the quantum to try and bring it all together. So let's start with the psychological. The voice of the wound is the product of how your brain and nervous system developed in your earliest years. Until around the age of 7, kids live predominantly in theta brainwaves, as I explained in part 1, which is the same that you can access in meditation or hypnosis or even in trance. In the theta, there is no rational filter. It's there's no ability to test reality. Whatever the kid sees or hears, or it just basically sees it as whole, and that's exactly what the truth is. So a mum sighing at the dinner table, or a father's sharp tone, or the family's way of dealing with conflict, all of it goes straight into the subconscious as this is how life works. So the child does not conclude, oh, my parent is carrying unhealed shit. The child concludes, I'm the problem. If the child's joy is shamed, they think they're too much. If their sadness is dismissed, they believe their feelings are worthless. If love comes only when they perform or behave, they believe that love has to be earned. Even though we hear it all the time, I love you unconditionally. Well, many parents' behaviour doesn't actually demonstrate that to a child. The conclusion these kids come to, it's not intellectual, they're somatic. The body encodes them as absolute truth. Right, let's look at neuroplasticity, which means repeated experiences strengthen neural pathways. The more often a child hears, stop crying, the stronger the association between sadness and rejection. So by adulthood, the brain fires this pattern automatically. The present moment becomes some sort of stage in which the past is reenacted. Same script, different cast. A frown from a colleague doesn't register as, oh, he's in a mood. It's like it hits the child as scolding. So the nervous system reacts with the same chemical cocktail of cortisol and adrenaline, and then shut down. This is why the inner voice feels so convincing. It's not just random self-talk. It's the body anticipating danger before the mind catches up. The subconscious can't actually distinguish between the past and the present. Its only priority is to keep you safe by predicting outcomes constantly. But safety, in this case, what we're talking about is a distorted kind of safety. It's the safety of the familiar. If a child grew up in chaos, well, chaos feels like home, doesn't it? If they grew up in dismissal, dismissal feels like the ultimate truth. This is why so many adults unconsciously will choose partners who echo their parents exactly, or jobs that replay old dynamics, or it could be friendships that confirm the same story over and over again. The body reads the familiar as safe, even if it's actually destructive. A child who learned, I don't matter, will really overlook red flags in relationships, and they'll accept these little crumbs and scraps as if they were a bloody banquet. A kid who learned, I must achieve to be loved, will drive themselves to burnout and unable to rest without guilt. A kid who learned, my feelings cause conflict, will silence themselves in meetings to keep the peace at any cost, or they'll numb out entirely. Can you see the programming? Until it's brought into awareness, the nervous system will keep playing the same script, and the voice of the wound will keep narrating life, and it will get louder and louder and louder. Now let's look at the spiritual lens, shall we? Every tradition has described the split between the voice of truth and the voice of illusion, let's call it. One leads us back to coherence, the other drags us into survival. In spiritual language, this is the choice between heaven and hell. Don't look at it as like a future destination, but as a state of consciousness we occupy here and now. The voice of the wound is hell. It's that constant commentary of fear. You're not enough. You're going to be abandoned. You must fight to be safe. It chains us to the past and it really blinds us to the present. It fills the body with dread, anger, shame, and life itself feels really hostile. So the voice beneath it, which is presence and essence and spirit, is heaven. It's steady, you know. It doesn't bargain or condemn. It simply says you're here, you're whole, you're loved. And when we listen to this voice, our nervous system softens. And then the body expands and we become creative and playful and connected and in flow state. Across traditions, this same divide is described in lots of ways. So let's look at fear and love. Fear shrinks, love expands. Fear contracts, the field of love brings incoherence. Then you've got ego and true nature. Ego speaks in shoulds and musts, and true nature is simply is. And then you've got the words 3D and 5D. In 3D, the voice of the wound insists on the world being scarce and hostile. In the 5D lens, we have presence and it reveals reality as fluid and abundant and alive. Then we've got demons and angels. They might not be horned creatures outside of us. They are the inner voices that tempt us back into fear. Angels are the intuitions and the felt sense of guidance that arises when we remember who we are and we're not the mask. When people live entirely in the voice of that wound, they live in hell, even if their outer life looks really successful. When they begin to recognize that voice as a veil rather than the absolute truth, they start to touch heaven as remembrance. Now, the tragedy is that most people take the voice of fear as gospel. They believe it's a warning that they have to obey its demands, that they let it run their choices. This is why the world looks as it does. And we've got all this conflict and division and scarcity. But if enough of us remember that the voice of the wound is not actually the self, then love begins to shape our choices instead. That shift is heaven on earth. The voice of the wound is never like a neutral self-talk. It's a major distortion and a commentary that drowns out your presence. Spiritual traditions describe it as the veil or the full sense that overlays our true nature with constant noise. The Psalms speak of the still small voice that arises when noise is quiet, yet most of us never hear it because the wound speaks louder. You're not enough, you're unsafe, you're going to be abandoned, etc., etc. The voice of God, or source, or consciousness, is subtle. The voice of the wound is really insistent. It hijacks our attention, so we live as if fear is our native language. In Buddhism, this voice is called Mara, the inner tempter who whispered to the Buddha under the Bodhi tree, trying to pull him back into the illusion. Mara wasn't like an external demon. He was the echo of unhealed patterns and the voice that said, "Stay small, stay afraid." when you hear you can't do this, you don't deserve this, you're broken, or whatever bollocks it comes up with, you're hearing your own Mara. In Sufism, the voice is the nafs, the lower self that clings to stories and appetites. A great mystic once said, don't listen too often to the deceitful voice, it hides behind sweet words. So that mimics truth, but it's only attachment dressed up as guidance. And then you got modern teachers like Eckhart Tolle, and he points out that the voice feeds on identification. He calls it the pain body's voice. The thought patterns that flare up when the wound is touched, basically. The moment you believe them, the pain body is strengthened. And the moment you observe them without fusing, that veil thins. It's the voice of the wound is the veil that keeps that true essence out of reach. We live through the commentary as absolute truth. We let it drive our choices and sabotage our relationships and create realities aligned with its own fear. We obey the voice of the wound instead of actually hearing the voice of presence. True spirituality is about remembering who you're not. When you can witness that narrator and you hear its tone and feel its pull without mistaking it for the self, the identification, you begin to live from that still small voice beneath it. That's the one that is steady and it's compassionate and aligned. And that is the one that was there all along. Now, let's have a look at the quantum. So let's take the same topic and look through a different lens. Thoughts aren't passive. Every thought is an energetic event. So neuroscience shows that a thought is an electrical impulse firing across synapses. Physics shows that electricity generates electromagnetic fields. In other words, the words in your head aren't silent. They ripple outwards and they broadcast. Now let's add repetition. When the same inner phrase is spoken day after day after day, I'm not good enough, I'll be abandoned, I'll always get it wrong, it becomes more than a fleeting thought. It's like striking the same tuning fork over and over until the entire room hums with that note. The subconscious doesn't know metaphor, it doesn't debate, it simply accepts repetition as their reality. So at the quantum level, reality is probability until it's observed. So superposition means that many possibilities exist at once, but what collapses into form depends on the observer. What we rarely acknowledge is that our inner voice is a constant observer. And every time you believe the wound, I'm unsafe, I'm unworthy, you collapse the wave into a timeline that confirms that. You literally tune into the version of reality that resonates with the frequency of that voice. This is why traditions, they place such weight on language. So the Vedas describe sound, sabda, as the root of creation. The Bible begins, in the beginning was the word. And mystics across cultures knew that words aren't symbols, but they're actually like vibrations. And what we say inside is just as formative as what we speak out loud. Over years, repeated thoughts form this, and they gather this like density. That's the only way I can put it. They move from whispers to the entire atmosphere. And Carl Jung describes them as complexes, so patterns of thoughts and feeling that act almost autonomously. In mystical language, they're called is it egregores or demons? But they're not creatures lurking outside us. They're energetic entities fed by repetition, gaining momentum through all of our constant attention on that. In the same way, repeated frequencies of love, prayer, gratitude generate what traditions call angels, coherent fields of guidance and support. Both are real at the level of vibration. Both are fed by voice. So the inner critic then is not just in your head. It's a generator, and it sends a signal that shapes which version of reality you collapse into and what collective field you reinforce. One person repeating, "Oh, I'm worthless," shapes their personal trajectory. Millions repeating variations of "we're doomed" and "the world is hostile, there isn't enough," that shapes our global outcome. And this is why society looks the way it does. It's collective resonance. Reality is only a reflection of the state that you prefer. What this means in practice is that your inner voice is not describing reality, it's choosing it. A fear-based voice projects you into a fear-based world, and a coherent, compassionate voice projects you into reality where those qualities can meet you. We're not all in the same world. We are each tuned into the world that matches our broadcast in the most basic term. The principle has even been tested. I don't know if you've heard of this. In the 70s, there were researchers and they were studying transcendental meditation. And they documented what is called the Maharishi effect. When just 1% of a population entered deep coherence, crime rates dropped, hospital admissions decreased, and even warfare softened. A small group tuning into a coherent voice shifted measurable outcomes for the collective. If this can be shown at scale, imagine the impact when people stop feeding the wound and begin broadcasting presence. The voice inside you is not just commentary, it's code. I hate the word, but it's vibration. It's the script that decides which branch of reality you want to step into, moment to moment to moment to moment. When you identify with that wound, you strengthen the fear. And when you notice it and return to essence, you strengthen coherence. The frequency you choose is the world you live in. So let's back up. Last week you watched the mask in your outer behaviour, and this week we're going to turn inward. To the voice that comments on everything you do. This is a good exercise. Step 1, catch it. Catch the script. Keep it in a notebook or something nearby. And every time you hear that inner critic, jot the phrase exactly as it comes. It might be, "You'll mess this up. Nobody wants you. You're not enough." At the end of the day, look at that page and notice how repetitive it is. These are not hundreds of unique insights. They're a handful of old lines replaying like a broken record. Now, step 2. Give it a name. Choose a name for this voice. It can be, well, mine's Clive, as I said earlier. Just whatever you want. Whatever helps you see it as a character, not your essence. And the moment you name it, you've created distance. Instead of "I am useless," it becomes, "Oh, Clive says I'm useless." And that shift can seem small, but it really does interrupt your identification. So pretty soon, you should start to realise you are a complete and utter bully to yourself. Step 3. Dialogue on paper. Take one of these repeated lines, write it down as the voice, and then underneath, let your awareness reply. So, for example, your voice could be, "You're going to fail at this." And then you can write underneath, "Thank you, Clive. I hear your warning, but I'm not a kid anymore. I don't need to collapse. I'm actually quite safe here." Do this with 2 or 3 lines and let awareness have the last word. Don't try to delete the voice. You're teaching your system that it is not the only narrator. We don't want to delete it. We don't want to get rid of it because that is just more pressure. Okay, and what we resist persists. Number 4, tune the frequency. After you finish the dialogue, close your eyes and just place a hand on your chest and repeat the wound phrase once. I'm not enough. And feel what the body does. Does it contract? And then try and whisper a coherent phrase. I am here. I am whole. And feel what the body does then. Just do it once a day. You're training your nervous system to recognize the difference between the wounds, the wound's vibration, and the presence in that moment. Step 5, watch the world mirror. Over the week, pay attention to how the outer world reflects the inner narration. Do people respond differently when you're collapsed in the wound versus when you're steady in your presence? Write down even the smallest shifts. This is how you begin to see the voice equals frequency equals reality. Now, the truth is, some voices are really hard to face alone. If your inner critic has been running the show for decades, meeting it with awareness can feel really bloody overwhelming. And that's where deeper work becomes invaluable. If you do need help in this, because it's not always easy just to snap out of something and do all this work that I mentioned above, especially if there's severe mental health issues, you should consider getting support from a qualified therapist. In my one-to-one sessions, I hold the space for you to sit without that voice, and it creates a sense of safety. So we can trace it back to its origin and begin to rewire the script at its root. It's also worth mentioning that this type of self-inquiry is very difficult to do if you don't live in a safe environment, if you're in a relationship that involves domestic violence or coercive control or a codependent relationship. Sometimes we do have to look at the outside first, and we have to make our immediate environment safe before we can start to do this level of work. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Do share this with anyone you feel will benefit from the content. Like and subscribe, and I will be back soon with part 3 of the series. Use the comment section and tell me how you have felt this experience has gone for you, what you'd like to contribute to the discussion, and I'll catch you soon. Bye.